So unless you've been living under a rock for about the last week or so, you probably noticed that the Red Sox traded former third baseman Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants, barely 2 years after signing him to a massive 11-year, $331 million extension. Many Red Sox fans are understandably pissed off about this, comparing this move to the horrific trade that sent Mookie Betts to the Dodgers, who, by the way, was a better player that they just didn't feel like extending, for a measly package of Alex Verdugo and a couple other guys nobody really cares about. Needless to say, that wasn't a great deal. In fact, fans are so angry about this Devers trade that some of them are comparing it to the Babe Ruth deal, where the team sent him to New York so that the owner could fund a musical, or however the legend goes. Now, I wouldn't exactly say it's that bad. Comparing Devers to Babe Ruth is definitely a bit of a stretch, something Devers wouldn't do at first base for Boston, but I can't say I don't understand the sentiment. Sending a very talented lefty slugger away to save money, this time not for a play, but for like a soccer team or something, it sure doesn't invoke good memories or good omens. And besides all the fan fallout and panic and rationalizing going on, the most fascinating part of all of this to me has been what seems to be a concerted effort to run some sort of character assassination or coping campaign undertaken by the Red Sox and their front office. Some of the things that they've come out and said about Devers in the days since the trade come off to me as extremely petty, and it's almost as if we're seeing in real time them attempting to sell themselves on the idea that the trade was good and a just decision. One of the most obvious and least surprising of these examples is former steroid user David Ortiz coming out and saying that he made multiple attempts to reach out to Devers to offer his mentorship and testosterone injection protocol, more than likely, only to be rebuffed and ignored completely by Devers. And on top of this, you have David Ortiz posting snarky Instagram stories, saying sometimes you have to be more than a hitter, which is throwing stones from a glass house if I've ever seen it. You have him showing off literally the unanswered text messages from his phone on live streams. You have him giving all these lame, passive-aggressive loser quotes to the media, and he's acting like Drake. And it's really weird. I've never seen a former professional athlete act more like Drake. Rafael Devers might be David Ortiz's Kendrick Lamar. This is getting sad. He's in his 50s. And of course, leading up to this in the first place, you had the entire fiasco before the season, where Devers was slotted to be the everyday third baseman, before at least, and even a little bit after, going out and getting Alex Bregman. And now all of a sudden, Devers is relegated to a permanent DH role because of how terrible of a fielder he is, and also because of the fact that first base was blocked by an up-and-coming Tristan Casas. And then, oops, all of a sudden, Casas is hurt, out for the year. Rafi, can you start playing first after we told you that you'd be the third baseman and then changed our minds to put Bregman at third instead of second, like Alex Cora said publicly? And then, after we've stuck you in the DH spot because of how visibly horrific you are in the field. Look, I get it. Honestly, I know that you want to be a team player and all that. I know how important that is for the organization. It's a good look, but Jesus Christ, the team is not doing itself any favors by jerking the guy around like this. And then you have Craig Breslow going on his apologetics tour saying things like, and of course I'm paraphrasing a little bit, looking back, we might win more games without Devers than we would have otherwise, implying with Devers. In other statements, he's also implied that there was an issue with the culture and the clubhouse environment, and that Devers didn't exactly fit into the mold or the vision of what they were trying to build in Boston. You have stories leaking about Devers being mad that rookie Christian Campbell was taking reps at first base, and apparently this hurt Devers' ego. It all just seems so ridiculous and absurd. By the way, shout out MLB Scoops on Twitter. They had that first somehow. And to top it off, when Devers in his first press conference introducing him as a Giant says that he's here to play wherever the team wants him to, and then he's taking grounders at first base in preparation to play there because, once again, third base is blocked by a better fielder. I mean, how else do you describe this other than a complete shit show? In the fallout of all this radioactively toxic drama, a very interesting article from Yahoo Sports of all places. By the way, you guys remember when Yahoo was a direct competitor with Google? Life moves fast, man. Anyway, article by the always insightful June Lee drops, and it pretty much all but confirms my shit show hypothesis. First things first, apparently there were some differences in philosophy between Breslow, the chief baseball officer, which is a sick-ass job title, and Alex Cora, the now longtime manager of the Red Sox, who, whether you love him or hate him, has definitely solidified his place in the Red Sox mythos. The article noted that Cora seems to prefer veteran players with more big league experience, playing guys like former Yankees legend Rob Refsnyder, who they've somehow turned into a decent bat, and Romy Gonzalez against lefties over top prospects like Marcelo Meyer and now Roman Anthony. And this has only been one point of contention between the front office and the coaching staff. And if having tension between those two aspects wasn't enough, there's also intra-front office drama unfolding, where people who have been involved in the organization for a long time and that have played a part in building championship rosters over the last couple decades are getting shuttered and are frustrated with their lack of input and with the direction their baseball operations are being taken. Some of this animosity apparently stems from when Breslow brought in a consulting firm called Sportsology, brilliant name, to conduct an audit on the team and how they run things, which, of course, as always, led to a bunch of longtime employees being fired and a bunch more being increasingly ignored. And to be fair, I get why you would want to do this as an organization, especially when the process seemed to work very well for the Astros nearly a decade ago. What they did was hired an outside consulting firm that essentially gave disgraced former GM Jeff Luhnow the power to run the team like a Wall Street investment firm, which did lead them to a World Series title and an additional 3 pennants on top of that in just a few years. If you're interested in hearing more about what the Astros did, why they did it, how they did it, there's a good book called Winning Fixes Everything by Evan Drellich. Sorry if I butchered your name. Great book, though. Very good way to look inside to how the team runs things. But the point is, it's not an inherently bad idea to bring in outside help to come look at your process from a neutral perspective and attempt to make it better. But obviously, these things are very dependent on how you implement the changes and how you navigate the existing culture that the team already has, both in the front office and then in the coaching staff and in the minor leagues, etc., etc. One of the funniest parts about the article by Lee chronicles an internal Zoom meeting between members of the Red Sox front office in which former scouting supervisor Carl Mushi made a mistake that anyone who's ever been on a Zoom call with annoying people wishes they had the balls to do. As the call was wrapping up, Moshi, clearly not enjoying how the meeting unfolded, blurted out, "Thanks, Brez, you fucking stiff," fully believing that the call had ended and that nobody could hear him, but in reality, everyone heard it, and he got fired a few days later. Baller as fuck, if I do say so myself. The same article briefly touches on how the big league coaching staff is upset with how some players are coming up seemingly lacking basic fundamentals, noting specifically fielding gaffes by Campbell and Roman Anthony, along with the fact that the team itself leads the league in errors made. Apparently, the coaches sent out Roman Anthony to perform fielding drills in front of the media in sort of an attempt to highlight the dysfunction and send a message to the player development team and front office that this is just getting ridiculous. It's unacceptable. At some point, something is going to have to give, and this internal civil war going on in Boston will eventually break, with one side having their way, and I have a pretty good feeling it's going to be the front office in Breslow's camp that ends up winning. So what happens next? If you know me, then you know that I can't say I like the Red Sox or even their fans all too much, but it's very hard not to at least have some pity for them. I mean, we're not talking about the Pirates here. We're not talking about the White Sox. They play in a huge market, and they just can't seem to make the right decisions ever when it comes to holding on to insanely talented players that any other organization would be lucky to have and would bend over backwards to get. It is unfortunate, but as things stand now, this is how they operate. Alex Cora most likely getting fired after this year if the reports of tension between the front office and coaching staff hold any water. And what they'll most likely do is get an Aaron Boone type of guy to fall in line with the whims of the higher-ups, who will act as nothing more than a mouthpiece and a punching bag for the media when things go inevitably wrong. Because as important as advanced stats and baseball science is, you have to remember it's still a game played by humans. And looking at things from a purely abstract, numerical lens will not always work out the way you think it will. It's all about finding a balance between these two different arenas of thought. For the team itself, their farm system's incredibly deep. I think Kyle Harrison might actually be a nice pickup from the trade if he could put it together and pitch like the good prospect we all think he is. But there is a very real and probably high possibility that this is going to sting like a motherfucker if the trade ends up going the way of the Mookie Betts trade. If Devers and the Giants find their way to a title, and the package the Red Sox got back turns out to be a massive heap of nothing again, I would imagine fans are going to be a little tired of John Henry and his co.'s antics, and just borderline insane decision-making. Just remember, when you see all the news that's going to be flowing in from Bostonian sources, it's an attempt to control the narrative and, in a sense, get ahead of the curve to prove to themselves and to their fans that this deal was the right and only move to make. But as we all know, only time will tell for sure if it was the correct choice or not. And if past history is any indicator, Red Sox fans, it might be a rough 9 years.